Hey guys, Yoshi here, and in today's part of my guided series, I'm going to be talking about the Hunter exotic tier list. And let's just get right into it. So first up, we got the Knucklehead Radar. For PvP, I gave it an S tier, and PvE, I gave it a F tier. Reason being, it gives you a permanent radar plus enhanced radar, so it's extremely useful for PvP, but having a permanent radar or enhanced radar for PvE doesn't really help because you pretty much already know where the ads are coming from. I mean, I don't really have to explain why this is useful. Having a better radar is just always going to be better for PvP. You're always going to be able to find players like a lot easier. And since your radar never goes away when you're aiming down sights, you always have it up. So you can be sniping and holding a lane and still have your radar up. So it makes it an extremely useful exotic, especially um, for newer players, I think, who aren't used to the um, radar mechanics in the game. It can be especially helpful for you, and that's why I have it as S tier rather than like A tier or something like that. Next up, we have Celestial Nighthawk, PvP F tier, PvE triple S tier. Um, for the note, yeah, why are you using this in PvP? What it does, if you don't already know, for bottom tree Gunslinger or bottom tree Solar for hunters, it turns your golden gun from 3 shots into just one compressed shot that does an insane amount of damage. First off, why would you do that to yourself in PvP? Compress all your shots down into one shot that's meant for killing bosses other than to just like flex on your opponents. Really has no purpose in PvP. You're going to be want to focus on trying to get this exotic for PvE use. It's a very powerful boss slaying tool or boss damaging tool. I just overall find it very, very helpful in end game activities or solo activities, depends on what I'm doing. Next up, we have Foe Tracer. PvP, I gave it an A, and PvE, I gave it a B minus. Even though One-Eyed Mask and Foe Tracer got their wall hack mechanic nerfed to like a highlighting thing, it's still good because you still do bonus damage to people. And if I'm correct, if it has, I can't exactly remember if it still does it or not, but like with One-Eyed Mask, it highlights enemies, and if Foe Tracer does that still, I mean, the highlighting thing is not like it's incredibly hard to find people who are highlighted. It's just you're gonna have to pay attention a little bit more to your surroundings or which opponents are highlighted or not. But it is still a powerful exotic. It's just not as good as it was before, giving you mini wall hack like things. And then yeah, for PvE, it can help with concentrating on certain targets, allowing you to do bonus damage. I wouldn't say it's super effective, but it's definitely better than average. That's why I have it sitting at B minus. But I'm not confident that it's really that great of an exotic to be using. It's definitely like a exotic to use if you have it and you don't have any other like A or S tier or better exotics in your inventory. Definitely could be an exotic worth picking up. Next up, we have Graviton Forfeit. PvP, I gave it an F, and PvE, I gave it a D. Reason being that it does, even though it does extend your invis time, it's not that much, and it doesn't seem to be that helpful in most situations. Extending your invis time may be helpful for running certain builds in PvP or PvE, but the thing is, like, there are better exotics that extend your kit much better than Graviton Forfeit. I think I covered the kit extension thing in the Warlock video. And what I mean by this is that you want to focus on exotics that help you, can help with your ability regen or add something on like that's broad and on top. You don't really want to be using exotics that only focus on like one perk tree or like a super like gimmicky type of play style. You want to try to like create um what's the word I'm looking for? Like a more open play style. I'm not exactly sure what I'm trying to say here, but if you do understand what I'm trying to convey, then you'll see why Graviton Forfeit's not a good pick for either of these activities. Next up, we have Wormhusk Crown. PvP, I gave it an S tier. PvE, it's a B plus. Probably could be like an A or A minus in PvE. It is a very useful exotic, especially if you're in a pinch and you really need to get your health back. PvP, it synergizes a lot more with the seasonal artifacts. There have been artifacts in the past, or seasonal mods in the past, that have given hunters the ability to get an overshield when they dodge. And when you combine that with Wormhusk Crown, not only do you get a temporary overshield for like a second, you also heal yourself, and it pretty much makes it so you can't be killed while you're in your dodge, and you get your health back, and you can disengage from the fight. So even without the artifacts though, Wormhusk is still strong on itself just because you can heal such a large amount of health. And it's not as good as it once was. Wormhusk has been nerfed um, from year one to year two or whatever. But getting health back in PvP, especially like a significant amount of health, allowing you to disengage or re-engage, if you will, makes Wormhusk Crown a very strong exotic. And then for PvE, yeah, you can be in a pinch. It can be very helpful for getting health back if you're about to die and you're like last alive, or you need to revive someone or something like that. It can be very useful when paired with Invis. So you go Invis, get your health back. You can disengage from PvE ads, and then when you're full health, you can re-engage, revive your teammates, etc., etc. Next up, we have Assassin's Cowl. PvP, I gave it a B, and PvE, I gave it an F. Might be lower now because of some of the changes to the knife and how this exotic works with the super that a lot of people are using it with. I think people are using with arc staff, and every time you hit with your arc staff, it would proc Assassin Cow's ability and turn you invisible. I believe that was a bug. Now it was fixed in the not the latest patch, but in the patch for the season, the seasonal patch coming into the season. So it's not as useful anymore. It's definitely very gimmicky again, requiring you to get a knife to kill to go invisible, and how useful you perceive that honestly is up to you. Might change this from a B to like a D or D plus or C minus. I don't think it's an entirely useful exotic. I do believe there are way more useful exotics in the PvP pool for hunters. Same thing for PvE. Having your throwing knife turn you invisible. I mean, there's so many better exotics that you can have. I don't know why I would ever use Assassin's Cowl on PvE. Next up, we have Young Ahamkara Spine. It buffs your trip mines. I don't know why you would like care though. It makes you use trip mines, but all it does is buff your trip mines. And like if you have constant grenade uptime, maybe it can be helpful, but nah, it just enforces you to use trip mines, and then you sacrifice buffing any other abilities in your kit or giving you an additional ability or whatever. So not very useful. Next, we have Mechaneer's Trick Sleeves. I gave it a PvP D plus and a PvE D plus. The reason I paused there is because this exotic had potential, but then Bungie nerfed it. The reason it had potential is uh when you proc the perk, it would just automatically reload your sidearm from reserves into your mag. I don't believe it does that anymore because of the whole auto reloading nerf slash patch that was introduced into the game to bring guns more in line with how Bungie wanted mechanics of bosses and raids, etc., to actually work. They didn't patch it at first, and then I guess they realized it got through because people were making posts about it, and then they patched it, so I don't think it's as useful anymore. Maybe if there's a meta with sidearms in the future, it can be good again. I'm not saying sidearms aren't good currently, it's just most people aren't using them, and there are other guns like hand cannons that are just way better than sidearms. They just overall perform better. So Mechaneers, Trick Sleeves, if sidearms, however, in the future get better, then maybe they can become good again. I don't know. And of course, we have Aeon Swift next, sitting at the double F tier. Reason being, yeah, Aeon. Only works if you have multiple people on your fire team using Aeon Swift. And by multiple people, I mean a full 6 squad of people using Aeon. Otherwise, it's just useless. You can just spec your mobility up to 100 and get the same effect as Aeon Swift would give you for your dodge cooldown timer. Next up, we have Shinobu's Vow sitting at a PvP D and a PvE F. Reason being, yeah, it buffs your skip grenades, but again, with young Ahamkar Spine, not very good. The reason I have it as a D tier instead of an F tier for PvP is it does these skip grenades track, so it makes them a little bit more useful since it buffs them, but, again, same with young Ahamkar Spine. Who cares? There are better exotics available. Next we have, I think I mixed it up here. Young or Mechaneers Trick Sleeves don't, they just buff your sidearms. Sealed Aham Grasps are the ones that reload, and yeah, they don't actually still, they nerfed it. So it's F tier. So please excuse that Mechaneers Trick Sleeves explanation. Next up, we have Shards of Galanor, setting it at a PvP C tier and a PvE B tier. And then, yeah, if you're playing Mayhem, definitely use these things. They are freaking overpowered. They're also overpowered in Gambit round 3, just basic Gambit, not Gambit Prime. In Gambit round 3, you get increased super regen, and if you get like 1 kill with your super with your blade barrage with shards on, you pretty much get the super back. Like that's how like weirdly it operates. However, if you're playing PvP, unless you hit 3 guardians with your blade barrage, then maybe this exotic is worth using. If you don't hit 3 guardians with your blade barrage, you're not going to get a significant amount of super energy back, and then it's probably worthless, and you're better off taking other exotics over this. However, in PvE, depending on the activity and depending what you're doing, you can kill like a ton of ads with a blade barrage. I don't recommend this for doing like boss damage or anything like that. I do believe the Celestial Nighthawk with the bottom tree gunslinger is a lot better than using shards. However, shards can be useful for ad clearing activities, or if you're just, you just don't want to have to aim anything. You just press one button and it kills everything. Next up, we have Oathkeeper, PvP C tier and PvE D tier. Reason being, bows are just okay in PvP. They're nothing extreme. They're nothing too bad. Definitely can be good if you're good at using them. I really do like bows in this game, although I do feel like they need a buff in terms of damage. And Oathkeeper can help make using bows a lot easier since when you draw your bow without the exotic, after a certain time you eventually let go of the draw and it shoots the arrow. However, with Oathkeepers you can draw indefinitely, so pretty useful. Next up, we have Liar's Handshake, PvP sitting at a B minus and PvE sitting at an A plus. Reason being, for PvP, it can be super situational. If you get yourself into like a melee fight or something, it can be useful, but most of the time, you're not getting into a punch fight with another Titan. You're probably already dead if someone's in range like that. So that's why I say it's super situational. However, for PvE, it's probably one of my go-to exotics when I'm playing Hunter. It's extremely fun to play with. Pretty much you get an infinite melee, essentially, that you can always have up, and your dodge will always be up if you're using the right dodge. If you're using the gambler's dodge, what you do is you punch your opponent, the enemy, then you dodge around opponent's ads. You get your melee back, you punch again, get the kill, you get your dodge back, repeat. And then it is even better when you're using a shotgun with 1-2 punch. So you shoot your shotgun at your enemy 1-2 punch, then that perk procs. You punch them with your liar's handshake, then you dodge, repeat the process. And if you're doing it with the top tree um, arc staff or whatever cross combination I think it is, where it buffs your melee or whatnot. So it's a very strong build for PvE if you get what I'm saying here. Next up, Kefri Sting, PvP C+, and PvE F. I'm probably going to have to revisit this one. I've reminded myself before I started this, I might have to revisit this one, especially with the buff that they gave Kefris. They made it so your smoke bombs do 150% damage if anyone's sitting in them. And not only do you get the damage buff, you still have the wall hacks, the flawless execution, where you can see bodies through walls with the exotic. However, it requires you to not use the smoke on enemies. I don't really get the smoke buff. And then you use your smoke to see the enemies, so it can be useful in certain situations. However, I don't really play with I don't like to use smoke like this to give myself the wall hacks. I just prefer, there are other exotics I prefer over the smoke. I just, I mean, I know it sounds very good because of the ability to see people through walls. It's just, it doesn't suit my playstyle, so I personally don't use it. Doesn't mean that this exotic can't be like an S tier for anyone who's watching this video. It definitely could be an S tier or somewhere around that range. It's just I personally do not like using this exotic in the playstyle that it creates. Next up, we have Raiden Flux. I believe it extends the chaining of your like arc um, of your arc staff lightning chains or something like that. Again, it's not very helpful. It's not that it's super useless. That's why it's not F, but it's not like average or something I would consider taking. It might be like a meme exotic to take. So, double D here. I just don't think Raid Flux is very useful. Although I have clanmates who may disagree, but I just don't think it's very useful. Next up, we have Lucky Raspberry. PvP, I give it a C, and PvE, I gave it an F. Yeah, it can make your hand cannons a little more potent because it can reload them based off of your precision shots. However, I don't know. I just think using like Stompies or Dragon Shadow is a little bit better. I mean, hand cannons are incredibly good in PvP. So definitely if you don't have any of like my other recommended exotics, Lucky Raspberry can be like an A tier for you because it offers something that's relatively good if you've got good aim and you're using a hand cannon. And then for PvE, hand cannons, I mean, in the past, Midnight Coup has been very good for ad clear because of its perks, but unless you got a good hand cannon, don't think it's very good for PvE. I personally don't use hand cannons a lot in PvE. That's why I have it as an F tier, so not very useful for me. Next up, we have the Dragon Shadow. PvP, I have it as the OP tier, and PvE, I have it as C tier. OP tier is a little bit of a meme. I kind of just put this here because if you ever go on the Crucible Playbook subreddit everyone's always raving how good this exotic is. Honestly, it's an S tier. It's not like it's super OP, overpowered, whatever. It's just what it brings to your kit makes it O like OP. It's not that it will necessarily help you, dominate, but it can, you know, help bring you to a point where you can dominate. It's not, it is OP, but it's not OP in a way that people think it's overpowered or whatnot. Because I do prefer using Stompies over the Dragon Shadow because I do spec into my mobility and I don't put myself in situations where my weapons aren't reloaded or something like that. And I do have like quick draw perks on my weapons, so I don't have to rely on Dragon Shadow's handling buff. But if you don't know, this exotic reloads all your weapons when you dodge, no matter what dodge you have. So you can take the gambler's dodge instead of the reloading dodge, and you can dodge to get your melee back, and not only you get your melee back, you can reload all your weapons at the same time. It also buffs the speed and handling of your weapons so you can quick draw them a bit faster. It's just a very good passive exotic. It helps your passive game a lot. So anytime you dodge, all your stuff is automatically reloaded. And you can take the gambler's dodge, which allows you to avoid taking damage better than the hunter's dodge where you can reload. I don't know. I just call it the reload dodge. I know the other one's called gambler dodge, but I don't know exactly what the reload one's called, the specific name for it. And then C tier for PvE because it's just not a PvE exotic. It's definitely designed for PvP. I don't find much use other than the auto reloading function. It can have potential, but yeah, it's not meta. Next is Ophidius Spathe. C for PvP, F for PvE. Gives you an extra throwing knife. Can be useful if you're using the one-shot knives, but the knives got nerfed, so they're not as overpowered and broken as they once were. Also, if you don't like throwing knives, then you're out of luck. And the other thing is that PvE throwing knives are just not very useful for doing damage. You want to bring something else like Celestial or Wormhusk, something that can actually, save you or whatnot. Throwing a throwing knife is probably not going to save you. I mean, it could be useful in certain situations, but it's not something I find that's going to help me out a lot in PvE. Next up, we have the sixth Coyote. I always have a problem saying six for some reason. PvP, I give it an A tier, and PvE, I give it a C tier. PvP or PvE probably could be buffed to like a B or B minus or something like that. Reason being that um, you have two dodges with this exotic, and if you have high mobility, you can have a dodge every 9 seconds already, but on top of that, you have two dodges. So you can dodge in and out of certain situations. This can be especially useful if you're using the top tree hunter, top tree void hunter, which allows you to go invis on your dodge. It can allow you to constantly be invis in PvP, which can be very useful since a lot of people are super reliant on using the radar for helping them find enemy players and get kills. When you're invis, it takes you off the radar, and if you're constantly invis, then well, you can see how that can be incredibly helpful for PvP. PvE, not as helpful. Having a dodge and going invis or having like the invis uptime in PvE can be helpful for getting yourself out of sticky situations. However, I don't see that having an extra dodge in PvE is entirely useful or is as useful as it is in PvP. Next, we have Gwizinvest. Extends your Spectral Blade time after every kill you get with a super. However, probably is like a C tier now for me for PvP. Even though Spectral Blade is still a good super, it's just this is like the issue I have with Geomax kind of for Warlock, is that having to equip an exotic that forces you to use that only buffs your super, it's only gonna be good when you're using your super. And if you only get 2 kills with your super, then the whole point of you equipping that exotic was rather pointless. You could have had something better like Wormhusk Crown or Dragon Shadow, or eventually I'll get to your Stompies. You could have that over Gwizzin. Just doesn't make Gwizzin very good. And then in PvE, I don't know why the heck you're using Spectral Blades. Yeah, probably you can use Spectral Blades to clear like trash tier ads better, but there are way better supers out there than Spectral Blades for PvE activities. Next up, we have the new exotic for the season, Raiju's Harness, which was disabled previously and is now back again. I gave it an A plus for PvP and a C question mark for PvE. The reason being is I don't really use the Whirlwind super in PvE ever. I gave it a C plus or C tier because like question mark because it's definitely not awful because it's like Geomags, allowing you to cancel your super, but it's definitely not that good because I don't value Arc Staff that much in PvE activities. I prefer to use Golden Gun or Tether in PvE activities, so just not a go-to for me. However, PvP reason being A plus is the whole bit of it is being able to cancel your super and save your super like that. That is such a good thing to have, especially when it's even though it's like an addition on top of the kit, when something like this probably should have been built in the kit, like how Geomags is, it's just I think it can be very helpful, especially since if you know how to use that super is very strong, and being able to cancel that super after whatever you need to do has been done, then, having super in PvP activities and having it constantly up is a very good thing. It's going to allow you to get a lot of kills. Next up, we have Lucky Pants, PvPD, PvED. Um, I think same thing like Lucky Raspberry. I I'm confusing them again. Lucky Raspberry and Lucky Pants. Same how I confuse the Sealed Ahamkar Grasp and Mechaneer Trick Sleeves. Is that, yeah, again, I can't remember. They have such similar abilities. It just buffs hand cannons. Again, forces you to use hand cannons for PvE. I don't really like using hand cannons in PvE that much. PvP can be good, but better options exist. Next up, we have Orpheus Rig. Gave it a F tier for PvP and an S tier for PvE. Even though they got nerfed in PvE, they're still good. They still give you like more than half your super back, if not all the super back. It's just diminishing returns. It's not as, quick as it once was. I don't know why you would use Orpheus in PvP. Like you're probably only going to be trying to tether like one person who's in their super. You're not tethering multiple enemies. You're not going to get enough orbs back to regen people's supers or even your super. It's just not an and not an ideal exotic to be using with the top tree. There's so many better exotics you can use with top tree void for hunter to make a better kit, more useful kit. And then next we have my favorite exotic, Stompies. Triple S tier for PvP, if not downright OP, and for PvE, a B plus. Reason being, it's like transversive steps for the Warlock. It increases your movement speed and jump height. However, it doesn't increase your crouching speed, unfortunately. Movement in PvP is extremely helpful, especially if you have like 100 mobility. Not only is your jump buffed from the 100 mobility, you jump higher. You jump even higher with Stompies on, and it increases your overall movement speed for um, with using Stompies, very good for shotgunning, aping, etc., or just getting in and out of zones, or just pushing with Stompies. Stompies are in a way better than Transversives just because of how the Hunter jump works. You can cover more area of the map than Transversive can in fewer time just by jumping around. Can be helpful in PvE, especially for jumping puzzles or activities where you need to jump a lot. Other than that, not that useful in PvE, but definitely can offer some help for people who don't fully understand the hunter jump, which is like the easiest jump in the game. Next up, we have Gemini Jester, PvP B, PvE D. If you have a high mobility stat, you can have a 9-second dodge, which means that every time you dodge, it disorientates your enemies. Can be useful in PvP, especially since it damages people when you dodge. You can see the damage numbers through walls, so you can use it as like a fake wall hack exotic, if you will. That's why I have it as B. But it requires you to use your dodge to do that. Sometimes it's not entirely helpful. It's not like when someone's confused, they're like completely brain dead or something. They can still see you. It's just that there's a big flash on their screen for a few seconds. So depends how you use it. It can be a lot better than a B, but you know, it's just it doesn't do it for me. And then PvE, disorientating your enemies, yeah, can be useful, but it's not really going to help you. Even like it's probably only really going to affect low tier ads, not really going to affect bosses or orange bars that much. Not very useful. Next up, Frosties, B at PvP and a B plus for PvE. When you're sprinting, it makes your abilities come back faster, so it can be good, just to have if you don't have the other exotics that I've listed in this tier list. Just good for keeping your grenade up, your dodge up, your melee up. Especially if you have high mobility, you can have like an even faster dodge cooldown. So you can already see how this can be very useful. If anything, it's probably like an A tier. Should probably change that to like A minus. PvE B plus. Reason being, it's very useful to have your abilities up. However, I just think Orpheus is better, and same with Nighthawk, just for getting your super back, having constant uptime for super, and allowing your teammates to have constant uptime for the super using Orpheus, Celestial Nighthawk for just boss nuking. It's a little bit better than Frosty's, even though you can have your grenade and dodge and melee up constantly. It's just, not that great. And then last but not least, we have the Bombardiers. PvP, I have it as a C tier, and PvE, I have it as an F tier. Reason being, it's a meme exotic. You can't catch people off guard in PvP. However, not a lot of people are going to fall for it. I mean, I don't think the explosion even does that much damage unless you've already tagged the person, then it can possibly kill them. PvE, the bomb just doesn't do enough damage. You can kill red bars, but probably not orange bars, and is useless against bosses. So overall, don't think the Bombardiers are a great exotic. They kind of just exist, if anything. And that concludes the Hunter tiered exotic guide slash list. And in the next video, hopefully I'll have it out. And the next day or couple of days, I'll be covering the Titan exotics. And that about does it for this exotic guide. So thanks for watching.